This is Photoshop Elements 11, and I'm going to show you how to set it up to either be more familiar if you're a previous Photoshop user, or to be more user-friendly if you're new to any kind of editing suite like this. For the Photoshop user, we have fairly familiar menus along the top here. We have a familiar toolbar down the left-hand side, although slightly different in format. It is double column and you can't change that. Over on the right we have the area where we normally have our layers, and we have one layer there showing the image I have here in the screen. At the top here you notice there's quick, guided and expert. We're only going to deal with the expert mode, where you have more control over what you're doing. Quick means Photoshop, basically you decide what you want done and Photoshop does it for you. Guided, you have slightly more control with Photoshop giving you some help prompts, but here we're on our own. Now, what's very unfamiliar to the Photoshop user is these icons at the bottom right here. There are a number of those, and we are also not used to seeing these other things at the bottom left either, but I'll come back to those later. Now, the reason I want to change the layout is not just on a whim, but because some things are difficult with this layer. For instance, if we decide we want to create some kind of effect on the image, and we'll go down to the bottom right here to Effects, click on it, and it comes up there. You notice that layer has no longer appeared, it's gone, it's been taken over by the effect, and whatever we click on is going to fill that whole panel, and we can no longer see what layer we're working on. And I don't like that. I like to see what's happening to my layer. So I'm going to click on layers here again, and we've got it back. But every time you click on one of these symbols, that's what takes up the whole of this area. So we're going to change that. And in order to do that, we're coming down to the very far right at the bottom to this square symbol called More. And to the right there's a little arrow, and we're going to click there. And it always comes up the wrong one. Somehow, if you don't click in the right space, it does something funny like that. I'm going to try for a third time, lucky, and it's not working, but we'll get there eventually. Here we are, that's what I wanted to do. It's the custom workspace, and I'm going to click on that, and you'll notice that all this stuff down here has disappeared and migrated to the top, and is now a series of tabs at the top. Okay. Let's have a look and see what we want to do with them. Let's have a look at favourites. Now, they may be other people's favourites, but they're certainly not mine, and I can't see that I particularly want to use them. So I'm going to drag this out of that panel. I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to close it down with this X at the top here. Okay. Now we're left with graphics. Now, graphics are quite interesting. There's an awful lot of fascinating stuff here, and it's well worth having a look at. Object, we've got animals there, we could have maps, we could have flowers, we could have by type, let's have a look, we could have frames. So we might find those quite useful at some stage. But by and large, this is for the graphic artist or the graphic designer to use, rather than the series photographer. So again, I'm going to just drag that out, and I'm going to click and shut it down. Now we're left up here with layers, which we definitely want to keep, and effects. Now, these are various filters. We've got artistic, pixelate, noise, all sorts of things on here that might be quite interesting to play around with. We've got effects, which this is faded photo, we might have monotone colour, we might have vintage photo. So again, we might want to play around with those, but the one that I find that I probably use most often is styles. Now, certainly if you make audio visual slideshows, you'll use styles for your titles and for frames of photographs possibly. So you've got your bevels, drop shadows here, you've got glows, image effects, doesn't seem to be embossed, but I'm sure that's there somewhere. So styles is something that might be useful to keep. So I'd like to keep that, but I don't want it there because, as you see, it's taking up the whole of this area. So I'm going to drag that out, but instead of closing down with this X, I'm going to drag it using this dark bar at the top. I'm going to drag it to the bottom of the right hand column, and eventually you should see a blue line level with the bottom of the workspace there, and I'm going to release my mouse and you'll find it docks into space at the bottom here. Now I don't want it taking up all that space, so I'm just going to double click on the word effects and that drops nicely in right at the bottom. Okay, I think I'd like something else there, so I'm going to go up here to the top to window, the window menu, and that has all the windows you might want, and I'm going to look at actions. Now actions, I'm going to bring that up here, are quite useful. What happens here is that whoever created the software has decided that they will record the movements required to create bottom borders, lose weight, which makes it thinner, resize and crop, various special effects, all sorts of things down there. And what you can do is, all you have to do is you have to click on, let's have a look at faded ink. Click on the special effect you want, click on the arrow at the top, and it will do all the work for you, and that's a very peculiar looking faded ink action. Now I don't actually want that, so I'm just going to go back up the top to edit, and I'm going to ask it to undo levels. Right, now it's back to normal, but I still have an extra layer there, because every time you do an action or you do something, an adjustment there, it creates an extra layer. So I do want my actions, they're quite useful. Colour palettes, colour swatches, no, I don't want them. So I'm going to drag those out and I'm going to close them down. Histogram I do want, that's always useful to see whether something's too light, too dark. So I'll leave that, and we can have it in colours or we can have it in RGB. Which is perhaps the one we're more used to seeing on the back of our cameras, so it shows that this is all right on the light side. In fact, it's a reasonably good spread of pixels. History can be quite useful. It shows what I've already done so far. I don't use it a tremendous amount, so actually I'm going to remove it, but if you'd like to keep it there, obviously just leave it in place. So I'm going to close that down. I don't think I want the navigator. I don't want to particularly zoom in and out using the navigator, so I'll get rid of that. I tend to just scroll with my mouse wheel to make an image larger or smaller, and I don't think I particularly want the information either, so I'm going to bring that out and close that down. Right, so all I'm left now is my actions and my histogram, and I'm going to do the same as I did with the effects. I'm going to drag it down to the bottom the right hand side till I see the blue line, which is there, and there it's docked into space. It's again taking up too much space. I'm going to double click it and drop it right down to the bottom. Now I have all the things that I want to use here. I've got my layers, which I can see, I've got my actions, I've got my effects, I've got my histogram. At the top here I can make a new layer, I can create an adjustment layer, and this is quite interesting because every time you use this, let's say I want to do something with levels, brings it up here as a separate palette. I don't really want to do much with levels, but let's just move some things about just to do something with it. Okay, slightly darken it. Okay, and I'm happy with that. So I look it down, and you'll see that the levels is on a separate layer. So every time I do something with the adjustments, it will put it on that separate layer. Okay. Right, so I'm quite happy with that now. That's what I want to do. Now, let's just have a quick look at these items down at the bottom left-hand side. This, if we click on it, it's a photo bin, and what it does is any image that you have, because you could have 2 or 3 open at any one time, will appear along here. So this, in ordinary Photoshop, would appear as different tabs along the top, but there are actual images down the bottom here. Right, if I close that, that gives me more room for my main image. Now, I'm on the Move tool at the moment, so if I click the tool options, it shows everything to do with the Move tool. If I went to Clone tool, it shows me the clone stamp, the various options with that, the different kinds of brush, the size, opacity, blending mode, etc. So whatever tool I'm using, the information about that tool or the options about that tool are here. Pardon me. Are here and will appear in the tool options. Again, if I want a bit more room, I'm going back to my Move tool and just click that, and it's got rid of. Here we've got our undos or redo things. That saves going up to the edit menu. We can rotate the image if we want to here. We can go to the organizer, which is the equivalent of Photoshop's bridge. That's where all your images might be stored. Okay, so that's a quick tour around setting up Elements 11 in a more useful way. Now I want to save this, of course, so I'm going to come down here to these icons at the bottom left and use the one second from the right called Layout. I'm going to click on the arrow and I'm going to click on Default. Now that means that whenever I close down Photoshop Elements, open it up again, this is the layout that I'll have. So I'm now going to close it down